pardon this is a great heresy, they start selling our faith. And they're still around, these people, they're known as the old calendarists. But what's interesting is that the four churches that actually retain the Julian calendar, they're not in communion with these schismatic groups. They're in communion with the people that are celebrating on the 25th. Because they're saying, that's fine. We have different approaches, different calendar, but it's the same faith.
He's crossing the candles again.
Yes, again, the patriarch is blessing the flock with the Dikirion and the Trikirion, with the two candles symbolizing the Holy Trinity and the two natures of Christ. And he said very important words. He said, we are thanking the Lord. Let us thank the Lord. Because the main sacrament of the church, the sacrament of the Eucharist, of Holy Communion, of joining this feast which Christ begins on the Last Supper, of bringing the bread and the wine which is to be consecrated as the body and blood of Christ. This is known as the Eucharist, as the mystery of thanking God, of thanksgiving. As one very prominent bishop who served in the United States said, our great problem, especially in religious communities and in the secular world, we're forgetting to give God doxa and Eucharistia, he used Greek words, glory and thanksgiving. Because the Christian life must be focused around the Eucharistic chalice, which means being in communion not only with Christ and his apostles and his saints, but with each other. In the earliest forms of Christian worship, actually, Christians would gather for a feast, and then they would have the sacrament of Eucharist with the body and blood of Christ being consecrated and handed out to the faithful.
But those are the basic teachings of Jesus.
Exactly. Christ starts this great mystery, this great supper, and you're hearing the patriarch recite Christ's words. Come, eat, this is my body, you eat, which is to be broken for the sins of mankind. And he gave the cup, saying, drink from this cup all, this is my blood of the New Testament. Every church you enter, whether it's St. Paul's Cathedral in London, or the Sveti Tsavelli Cathedral in Georgia, or the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow, or Notre Dame, or St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, you have to remember, this is not simply a house of prayer. A Christian can pray anywhere. A church is not a house of prayer only. This is a place where we come to join the Last Supper, to be united through the sacrament of the Eucharist, through the sacrament of Holy Communion with the entire body of the church and with Christ. That is the main symbolic and real mystic symbol.
And it's quite interesting, you mentioned a whole raft of cathedrals and churches, they're very famous, and I think you'd find that non-Christians, any religion, cannot deny that churches have a sense of safety, an unexplained feeling for anybody walking into them. And what is that feeling?
Well,
it's a spiritual feeling.
It's a spiritual feeling. I'm very biased in this sense, but being a Christian. But what is the Christian life? It's the encounter with Christ. First of all, it's a mystic encounter when you accept the reality of His presence and His sacrifice for you personally. And then there is the encounter with Him in the church. And sometimes you feel that it's the least likely place where you can encounter Him because almost the entire church is against you encountering Him. And we've seen that, and that is normal, that happens. But this encounter, through His presence in your life, through His presence in your loved ones, and through His presence in the sacraments, and especially in the Holy Communion, you can't disregard His words, come, eat, this is my body, this is my blood. This encounter has to take place in the church. And the entire church, its architecture, its art, its music, its ministry, it's about that encounter. That is what something that we have to appreciate. It's not just there to be fancy, to be powerful, to be gaudy. It's not there for itself. It's there for this remarkable witness of Christ's presence, which we actually see in the Eucharistic lamb, in the bread, and in the chalice of wine, which are being consecrated as we speak. The anaphora is taking place, and we are seeing the Holy Spirit descend on the body and blood which is offered, on the bread and wine which is offered, and being mystically transformed into the body and blood of Christ.
Is there a point here where the congregation will join in with the music?
They already did, actually, while we were talking.
It's more about answering, isn't it? What the patriarch says.
Well, we always answer amen and so on. But the two times that the congregation completely joins is during the reciting of the Lord's Prayer and during the reciting of the Nicene Creed. At these two points they join in. In medieval times they would join in more often because they would actually answer. Again, we see the patriarch is praying for all those deceased and living, for the entire body. Of the church at the moment when the body and blood of Christ when the bread and wine is being consecrated as the body and blood of Christ. It's interesting that the Orthodox are supposed to pray for the country. Not only for their native country, but for the country where they are living. Because again, many Christians forget this, that they are not of this world. Their kingdom is not Byzantium, or Greece, or Russia, or the Ukraine, or Romania, or Georgia. Their country is the New Jerusalem which is to come. But they have to take care and pray for the country where they are living in. They did pray for the emperor in the Roman Empire, for the emperor who was often persecuting them. They would never consider him a god. They would not sacrifice to the emperor, but they would pray for his well-being and for the well-being of the empire. Now you have people praying for the president of Russia and Ukraine and so on and so on. I think few people think that right now as we speak, for example, in the Russian cathedral in London, people are praying for the Queen of England. Because she's the ruler of the country where the congregation is. She is actually being mentioned and commemorated in the Russian Orthodox Church.
But it's respectful London. Because in effect it's praying for your country, isn't it?
It's praying
that you're living in.
Yes, for the country where you are. For the country where you were born, because we have this. It's actually supposed to be for the president or for the ruler of this country, not our country. Many Orthodox churches change this to our country, but one way or the other, you're praying for the country where you were born. You're praying for the country where you are, where you live, where you're visiting, for the entire world. The Christians have this responsibility not only to pray for their communities, but to pray for the world.
And today is a day to remember those values, isn't it?
most definitely. Again, this takes us to the Gospel of John. For God so much loved this world that he let his only Son come and die for its salvation. These are very important words.
Yes.
It doesn't mean God so much loved the pious that he wanted to save these few communities. God loved the world. So it's not only a chance for mankind to enter eternal life, to go back to this paradise lost. It's all of mankind, it's all of nature being saved by the blood of Christ.
I just want to go back to a point you made earlier,
Yes.
where you said that you had to read Matthew, Mark, and Luke before you could get to John.
Yes.
I'd like you to explain that a little bit further again. Because it is quite interesting. You just mentioned, right, the values are in the Gospel of John. But actually, you might never get to John.
Well, no, they're also there, obviously, in the Gospel, in the other Gospels. I'm going to probably get burned at the stake for this.
Don't say it then.
No, it's fine. By some pious people listening. But it's like a relationship. Before you have to get to know each other and accept the person, if it's truly about love, accept the person as who he is, with his thoughts, his experience, before entering marriage and the intimate relationship who might lead to the creation of new life. It's a very intimate kind of relationship, right? The same thing with the Gospels and the Catechumen. You have to accept the Synoptic Gospels. You have to accept the passion and the authority and the presence and the historicity and the reality of Christ's sacrifice before embracing the fourth Gospel, which is a gospel of ultimate and intimate love. It's like the path from the first date to the wedding bed. That's why I said, well, I'm going to get burned at the stake. But it's true. And you have this reference actually constantly as the relationship of Christ and the church as the bride and the groom. You have that.
Well,
and there's nothing evil about it. There's nothing sinful about it.
Well, nuns.
Huh?
If you look at nuns, historically, they marry.
They are the brides of Christ.
They are the brides of Christ. Yes.
Women martyrs, of course.
Yeah.
When finally getting to the Gospel of John, it's the gospel of ultimate love. For example, Dostoevsky and the Karamazov brothers has this wonderful kind of basically exegetic, theological contemplation of Christ's first miracle. And here's the question: what is Christ's first miracle in the gospel narrative? If you go by his life.
Oh God, you're testing me now.
Yeah. It's the miracle of Cana. If you go actually by the historicity of Christ, by the historical kind of story of his ministry, in the four Gospels, John brings about there's a first story of how Christ made a miracle. And Christ's first miracle is the miracle at the marriage of Cana. It's actually the first story, it's also the first case of Marian intercession on the behalf of mankind. Mary comes to Christ and says, "They have no wine, the wine has ended." And Christ says that, "Well, what do I care?" So please. And he turns the water into wine. And Dostoevsky and the Karamazov brothers beautifully says, look, this is about mercy and love to mankind. He can be strict, he can do something, but he does not demand anything, and he just gives something to ease mankind's suffering, to give them joy at their feast. He gives them the wine at the marriage. So this is a sign of ultimate love. And this is something that we should remember at this freezing cold night in Moscow or wherever you are. You're surrounded by loved ones. You're surrounded by people you might hate. You're surrounded by people that you might not even care about.
But that's not the point. It's about loving your neighbor, isn't it?
Look for the joy. Look for the greater glory of God, as St. Ignatius Loyola said, actually, the Jesuit famous saint. Look through every day, searching for something to thank God for. And when you found that little bit of joy, a little bit of something to be grateful for, share it. Make something that people become something or someone that can make God rejoice in you. Call someone that you had a fight with. Write to someone whom you offended or who needs attention. Embrace someone you love. Because that's maybe a very profound point throughout our life. Love and loss are, again, that's in this feast. It's always bittersweet. Love and loss are always bound together. But be thankful for the love that you receive. Be thankful maybe for that one person who's becoming your Cana, your marriage Cana, your water that turned into wine. And using that joy, using that love, just be thankful. Maybe that's the most important thing in this mystery of the Eucharist, in this feast of the Nativity. God so loved the world that he let his only Son come into the world and be killed for its sins. God came for our sake. Christ died for our sake. And think about that night in Bethlehem, this little child lying in a manger. And at least a few people, the wise man coming from the east, the herdsman, St. Joseph, patiently sitting there knowing that he's bound for his life to be with a woman with which he cannot sleep, that gave just birth being a virgin, and he has to be her guardian and the guardian of this child. And he's patiently sitting outside the cave, contemplating on this mystery, on this ungrateful ministry as being the husband and the guardian, and loving and asking for nothing from this mother and from this child. Think about the animals, which we see the oxen and the donkey who are trying to warm Christ, the infant Christ, with their breath, because again, Christ came to save not only mankind, but all of nature, ruined and corrupted by mankind. God's reflection is in all breathing and growing and creature in all creation. And when we think about that, I think we should think about the animals that try to warm Christ with their breath that freezing night. Think about that donkey in which Mary sat when Joseph was taken her to the safety of Egypt away from King Herod and his warriors. Think about the stars witnessing to Christ's birth. Think about families sitting in front of their television screens, maybe listening to this service or just praying, drinking wine, standing at the services, walking at their business. Think about them and pray for them, because right now, as we speak, we have wars raging. We have people in whose souls are so deliberately tormented by despair, by a sense of solitude, by a sense of pain that we want to inflict back on someone. Or maybe the night of the Nativity is the night when we have to pray for them and for ourselves, when we have to think about the fact that despite all the darkness in this world, despite all pain, all suffering, all imminent loss, because even if you are loved right now, you have this genuine fear of losing the one you love. And someday you will lose them, or he will lose you, or she will lose you. Be grateful for the moment. Be grateful for the light that is given, because in the end, you will go back to the light. You will rejoin the ones you loved. If you don't believe in that, there's no point in existence. If you're not grateful for the love that you have right now, or for the love that you have right now, if you don't have hope, there is no point in existence.
And this is what today is all about,
isn't it? This is what today
it?
is all about. Love and rejoice despite all odds. Because the baby born is going to be crucified before his mother's eyes, but he will triumph over death. And through him, we will triumph over death. We will go back to our home, which is otherwise would be lost to us. I mean, this is the profoundly important meaning.
But this is what you can see in the eyes of the congregation, isn't
You can
it?
see
It's
this
the
in
thought and
the
the
eyes of the
self-reflection.
in the genius of the composers, in the music,
Yes.
in the icons. They will suffer. They have a long line of suffering before them, but that does not mean that they will not rejoice this night before my gods. With the Magi, with the herdsmen, with Joseph, with the animals, with the angels.
But Sergei, explain the suffering, because often when people have gone, I'm sure many members of the congregation
Yes.
will question when they have a loss. They will question their religion. How do they come back to it if they're expected to suffer? It's deeply profound for some people. You know, you don't know what people are going through, do you?
You know, again, I'm not trying to missionize, but I think this is something that really differentiates Christianity from all other forms of religion and even from the Abrahamic religions. We do not have a God that gives law through the prophets and demands obedience. Because yes, we are living in a suffering world, and we're having a suffering God, because we are having a God who's the Father. He's the Father who gives his only Son as a sacrifice. He is the Son who is being sacrificed by the Father. So when, for example, losing a loved one, you relate to that. You relate to the fact that, well, you're living through what God lived through for your own sake.
And throughout this ceremony, it's mentioned and repeated.
On and on, constantly, obviously. Now we are having one of the vicars, Bishop Sergius, reading Patriarch Kirill's Nativity encyclical. The Patriarch congratulates his flock with the great feast of the Nativity, the feast which was prophesied to by the great prophets of the Old Testament. Ancient times we are standing in church listening to the sacred words describing the mystery of the Nativity. And nothing can chase the feeling of surprise and awe from our hearts when we contemplate the Nativity of Christ. Saint Simeon, the new theologian, the 11th century Byzantine saint, wrote, God coming into the world united God's nature and human nature so that man can become God. And that God, becoming man, can show the fullness of the Holy Trinity. Saint Ephrem the Syrian, the 5th century Syrian saint, wrote, now the divine embraces the human so that the human can embrace the divine. Listening to the wise words of these great saints of the past, let us ask ourselves, how can we embrace the divine seal in our life? How can we serve as the reflection of God's glory? How can we live to be the reflection of Christ? This answer is simple. Follow the commandments of Christ. With the Apostle Paul, I implore you, my dear, bear the burdens of one another, help one another, and thus you will become the revelation of Christ's law. Cover everything with love, and you will find peace. And you will embrace the glory which no one can take away from you, and the joy that no one can take away from you. And you will inherit the life eternal. It's so important that we Christians will not only call others to follow the great ideals, but ourselves would follow these ideals and make them come about in our everyday life. First of all, through the service to those that surround us.
Милостью Божией будем иметь в себе истинные плоды Духа. Любовь, радость, мир, долготерпение,
If we serve one another, we will
милосердие
inherit the great virtues of faith,
и воздержание.
humility,
Будем внимательны
love,
друг к
joy,
другу, поощряя в любви
charity.
и добрым делом.
Let us help each other with charity and love.
Конфликты, разделения мы не
Let us
делаем
fight
убедительную
division.
проповедь
Let us fight conflict through love and mercy, through our deeds and not words.
и духовной силе православной веры.
Only thus can we witness to the great faith of the Orthodox Church. We are entering the year 2017,
И ровно 100 лет отделяет нас от событий,
and 100 years separate us from the great and horrible tragedy of the Revolution and Civil War, which began a century back, when the children rose against their parents, when the brother attacked his brother. All what followed 1917, all of the trials, led to the destruction of something that was built upon 1,000 years of tradition. Our society remains divided in many ways. We remember the great victory of the new martyrs, which began 100 years back and continued through the years of the Soviet persecution. We remember the great feat of our people during the greatest and most terrible war. We remember the suffering of our people during World War II. We remember the rebuilding of our country in the years that followed. We remember the great miracle, the resurrection of faith in post-Soviet Russia. We are witnessing to the rebuilding of churches. We are seeing the rebuilding of churches and monasteries. This visible sign of the great change for the better that happened in the hearts of our compatriots in the last century. We have seen a great deal of great trials, tribulations, and challenges. But this experience taught us a lot, and we see that these trials are not there forever. Better times would come if only we remember and try to avoid the mistakes of the past. God is with us. Let us enforce ourselves in faith, for God is with us. We will grow in hope, for God is with us. We will grow in love and make good deeds, for God is with us. All of our hopes let us be placed on God, for He is the great fortress. There is no salvation in anything except God. Let the light of Christ always shine upon our path in this life, for this way will lead us to the kingdom of heaven, which is prepared by God who loves us. Spiritually rejoicing with all of you today, living in all countries and cities, but being a single flock of Christ, I wish you, all of you, health, peace in your families, success in your enterprises, and may the child born in Bethlehem grant you the strength and the heart to feel His presence in our world and in our life. Amen. This is the official Nativity encyclical of Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Rus. Now the royal doors will open. We see the katapitasma, the veil being opened. The royal doors will open, and The chalice, the body and blood of Christ, will be distributed to the congregation.